Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, Chapter 1 Discussion. Today I want to talk about the beginning of Pilgrim at Tinker Creek, one of my favorite books. It's a non-fiction exploration of really the whole universe. Dillard is sitting down and asking the big questions. It's a book of philosophy. It's a book of poetry. It's a book with a huge vision. And it's all about us looking around at the universe and wondering why. Chapter 1, Heaven and Earth in Jest, is Dillard's introduction and thesis for the book. And instead of starting with an argument, she starts with a striking image of a cat. I used to have a cat, an old fighting Tom who would jump through the open window by my bed in the middle of the night and land on my chest. I'd half awaken. He'd stick his skull under my nose and purr, stinking of urine and blood. Some nights he kneed my bare chest with his front paws, powerfully, arching his back, as if sharpening his claws or pummeling a mother for milk. And some mornings I'd wake in daylight to find my body covered with paw prints and blood. I looked as though I'd been painted with roses. It was hot, so hot the mirror felt warm. I washed before the mirror in a daze. My twisted summer sleep still hung about me like sea kelp. What blood was this, and what roses? It could have been the rose of union, the blood of murder, or the rose of beauty bare and the blood of some unspeakable sacrifice or birth. The sign on my body could have been an emblem or a stain, the keys to the kingdom or the mark of Cain. I never knew. I never knew as I washed, and the blood streaked, faded, and finally disappeared, whether I'd purified myself or ruined the blood sign of the Passover. She opens with a vision of wonder, a sign, a symbol, imprinted on her by an old cat. And of course, we're used to seeing blood as a symbol, something that is deeply meaningful. And yet, this symbol, this blood, this rose, is undecipherable. Like the beauty and cruelty of the universe around us, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around or put into a position of understanding. We stare at it and wonder. Jumping in with vivid imagery like this is exactly Dillard's style. In some ways, she causes us to experience her wonder as well, drawing us in with her. And once we're in deep, then she asks the tough questions. The book is effusive and exuberant, full of rich arguments, but even more so with recurring and vivid imagery. As she cycles back and forth between an intense observation of the world around her, questioning and observing. And each observation seems to not only draw new ideas, but also lead her back to old images and old ideas and re-examining them. In this first chapter, she describes an occasion where she was scaring frogs at a pond, and she saw one that didn't jump. As she approached closely, the frog began to collapse, and as she looked at it, she realized that it was being swallowed from the inside out by a giant water bug. This is a moment that represents the horror of the natural world. And to watch the cruelty and horror unfold before her eyes is so striking, it causes her to stop and wonder. She describes returning to the spot where the frog died, saying, "I'm drawn to this spot. I come to it as to an oracle. I return to it as a man years later will seek out the battlefield where he lost a leg or an arm." This moment marked her, and that markedness has a significance. Why does the world seem so cruel? What's the point? And if we wrap our mind around the cruelty of the universe, saying that that's just the way nature works, nature red in tooth and claw, then she notices that the world is also beautiful. If the world is cruel because it has to be, then why is it beautiful? And if the world is beautiful because we're meant to enjoy it, then why is it cruel? On page 9, she says, that it's rough out there and chancy is no surprise. Every live thing is a survivor on a kind of extended emergency bivouac. But at the same time, we are also created. In the Quran, Allah asks, "The heaven and the earth and all in between, thinkest thou I made them in jest?" That's a good question. What do we think of the created universe, spanning an unthinkable void, with an unthinkable profusion of forms? Or what do we think of nothingness, those sickening reaches of time in either direction? If the giant water bug was not made in jest, was it then made in earnest? Pascal uses a nice term to describe the notion of the creators, once having called forth the universe, turning his back on it. Deus absconditus. Is this what we think it happened? Was the sense of it there, and God absconded with it, ate it, like a wolf who disappears around the edge of the house with a Thanksgiving turkey? God is subtle, Einstein said, but not malicious. Again, Einstein said that nature conceals her mystery by means of her essential grandeur, not by her cunning. It could be that God is not absconded, but spread, as our vision and understanding of the universe have spread, to a fabric of spirit and sense so grand and subtle, so powerful in a new way, that we can only feel blindly of its hem. In making the thick darkness a swaddling band for the sea, God set the bars and doors, and said, "Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further." But have we come even that far? Have we rowed out into the thick darkness, or are we all playing pinochle in the bottom of the boat? It seems important to Dillard that we ask the question. Whether we ever find the answer is up for grabs, but we need to look for the answer. We need to open our eyes and observe the universe around us and try to find meaning in it. Maybe the ultimate understanding isn't there, but have we even opened our eyes and tried to see it? Have we even rowed out into the darkness, as she says? She says on page 10 and 11, "We don't know what's going on here. If these tremendous events are random combinations of matter run amok, the yield of millions of monkeys at millions of typewriters, then what is it in us, hammered out of those same typewriters, that they ignite? We don't know. Our life is a faint tracing on the surface of mystery, like an idle curved tunnels of leaf miners on the face of a leaf. We must somehow take a wider view, look out at the whole landscape, really see it, and describe what's going on here. Then we can at least wail the right question into the swaddling band of darkness, or, if it comes to that, choir the proper praise." This search for meaning could fall under the category of a theodicy. It's a quest to find out why God does what he does, why God creates a world that is both beautiful and cruel. In this quest, Dillard really falls into the tradition of transcendentalism, following the path tread by Henry David Thoreau and Ralph Waldo Emerson, trying to find the divine within the natural world. In order to do this, she's going to organize this book in two ways. One is a natural year. She walks through the 4 seasons to experience the natural world. At the same time, she's also following a progress of what's called via positiva and via negativa. The first half of the book is the via positiva portion, which is an attempt to find God in what she sees. She believes that by observing the natural world closely, she can find the meaning there. The positiva portion of that term reflects the idea of something being there, in the way that a cancer patient who gets a positive result isn't happy about it because it means that cancer is there. Positiva is looking for the existence of meaning within the natural world. On the other hand, the second half of the book follows a via negativa path, assuming that God is outside of the created world, and therefore all of creation is really obscuring our vision of what God is. We have to strip away all things that are not meaning, that are not God, and the God-shaped hole that we're left with in the end is the closest vision we can get of meaning. There's a clear turning point in the middle of the book when she switches from one side to the other. We'll explore this as we go through. At the end of this first chapter, she describes her role in all of this. And notice how she talks about things as being passive. She's responding to the world, trying to wrap her mind around it, not so much as directing her own action. On page 14, there are lots of subtle hints of what's to come. Go back and reread this portion after you finish the book, and you'll find many of her ideas packed into this page. She describes the nightmares and the struggles of this journey, as well as the bright visions. Her last vision of herself is another vision of hunting. Listen to her progress. I am an explorer then, and I am also a stalker, or the instrument of the hunt itself. Certain Indians used to carve long grooves along wooden shafts of their arrows. They called the grooves lightning marks because they resembled the curved fissure lightning slices down the trunks of trees. The function of lightning marks is this: if the arrow fails to kill the game, blood from the deep wound will channel along the lightning mark, streak down the narrow shaft, and splatter to the ground, laying a trail dripped on broad leaves, on stones, that the barefoot and trembling archer can follow into whatever deep or rare wilderness it leads. I am the arrow shaft, carved along my length by unexpected lights and gashes from the very sky, and this book is the straying trail of blood. Notice what she does there. She starts being the one searching through the world. Then she moves herself to the hunter, but more specifically to the instrument of the hunt itself, the arrow. She is the one passively flung out into the world, searching for meaning. And she leaves a trail of blood behind her in this book. Her observations, what she sees. And if we choose, we can follow it into the dark with her. And she closes with the feeling of being pummeled by something powerful, maybe something spiritual. As you're reading this book, in order to get the most out of it, I recommend letting her lead you along, giving yourself up to her vision. If you try to see the vision from her eyes and take it in the way she does, you'll get a lot more out of it. Drop the skepticism and embrace the surprise. The wider you open your eyes and the more you look at the world around you, the brighter and more vivid it becomes. We'll talk more about surprise next time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time when we talk about Chapter 2, Seeing.